Constantia Insurance Group has delivered a solid set of results under the leadership of its CEO, Peter Todd. The group has created an authentic and collaborative relationship with business partners, and over the past 3 years, it has focused on building and strengthening its systems and capabilities. Constantia now operates 3 insurance licenses and provides insurance solutions across 19 countries, with dominant positions in health and medical malpractice insurance, and a niche focus in life and property and casualty businesses. In the first of a series of conversations with the team at Constantia, I do believe it's quite fit that we start with Peter Todd, CEO, Constantia Insurance. Good to have you online, Peter.
Great to be here, Rianet. Nice to see you again too.
Yes, it's good to see you. So, Peter, you are a seasoned insurance CEO and have been the CEO of Constantia for the past 19 months, I think. What made you take on this role? Because you knew it was going to be quite a big role.
Yeah, Rianet, I think part of it was actually the fact that it was a challenge. Yes. And I had been sitting on the board in a non-executive capacity, so I knew a little bit about the business. And, I don't think it's any secret that we did go through a tough patch. And so at the time, when I was approached, I did think it was an interesting challenge. I'm always up for one. And since being in the business, I've got to know the business a lot better. And, I'm really passionate about the business and the opportunities that lie ahead for us. But I would say it's the challenge that really attracted me to this role in the first place.
It's great. It's what entrepreneurs like, or challenges, and you are one. So the last 18 months has been hectic. So you walked into a time when things were really hectic in our world, in our country, and in our industry. Between COVID-19, the looting and load shedding, how has that impacted Constantia on top of everything else?
Yeah, I think it's had an impact for everybody in our economy and in our industry as well. But I think the industry impacts have been quite different depending on where one plays in the industry. I think the biggest challenge I had to start with was that, we needed to restructure the business at the start. And I'd been in the job literally a couple of weeks, and we were about to launch that process, and then we went into our first lockdown. So that was definitely a challenge. We had to go through a Section 189 process, which ultimately resulted in a significant reduction in our headcount. And that was that ran through that entire lockdown period at the beginning. So it had nothing to do with lockdown, but it was an imperative for the business. So it was a challenge definitely to launch that. From a business perspective, we were lucky enough in that we escaped the big claims fallouts that came about as a result of COVID. So I think from that perspective, we were lucky. The segments that we play in and the niches that we play in also protected us a lot from the downside. Being a big health insurer meant that, in a health crisis, people don't easily let go of their health insurance cover. So our business was quite resilient, through the tough economic times. Yeah. And also because we play in the intermediated space, we had a slightly different LSM and, again, a bit more resilient. So from a pure business perspective, I think we were, lucky in that sense. Others really suffered. But yes, there is a bit of a knock-on effect in terms of, economic slowdown, people reducing the extent of cover. Obviously, there's some fall off and that sort of thing. So otherwise, we navigated all the other difficulties, remote working, etc. Everybody else has had to adapt, as have we. So from that perspective, no different to anybody else.
How did you and how are you handling the back to office or not scenario at Constantia? Is it pretty much a hybrid model now and going forward, or have you not made final decisions on that yet?
Yeah, so we've had changes to our office space in this period. All our offices in Joburg as well. We've now we were in 2 buildings. We moved that into 1 building, and so in all of those cases now across every part of the country where we have a presence, we have more people than we have desks. So that's by design. Okay. So it forced us to adapt to a new way of working. And I think we're all learning, how we're going to do that.
Yeah.
I think a big advantage I have as a smaller insurer is that, we are able to manage that, I think, a lot easier than the big insurers. We also don't have big call center environments either. So that certainly helps us to adapt to a new way of working.
Yes.
And for me, that's part of the culture we want to create in our business.
When you walked into the business, you had a plan, a strategic focus. Has that changed along the way? Did you feel that it needed some changes as you go along?
Yeah, Rianet, at the beginning, it was really about focus. So, just going back to what had been the success of Constantia in the past, and that was really working through partnerships. And I think we'd lost our way a bit in terms of that. So our focus then was to make sure that we were working with our partners, not against our partners, that things we did in the business was to enable our partners to succeed in their own businesses, which would then by definition make us successful. So it was really about fixing processes and, as I mentioned, the structure, getting the right systems and so on in place to make sure that we can deliver better service, getting on top of some of the technical stuff in the business in terms of underwriting, etc. We've now reached that inflection point, where we've done all that hard work. We've really fixed the business, been very internally focused. So, the whole COVID lockdown and slowdown was good timing for us in the sense that we were out of the market being very internally focused over that period, which meant we didn't lose out as much as we might have in a normal economic environment. But now we're at that inflection point where we now have to look forward to see where we can grow the business and how we can support those partnerships even further and how we can grow new partnerships. So, now it's talking about growth, whereas we spent 18 months talking about how do we fix and improve what we have that's existing in the business.
Yeah, I think the timing worked quite well out for you guys. So
yeah.
I've heard the phrase distributed work approach, an approach Constantia is apparently following. Please talk me through the approach and why you believe it's the way to do.
Yeah, well, that was really the point earlier about sort of how we work remotely, etc.
Okay.
And it's then about embracing that. So it'll be interesting to see how companies do embrace it. Everybody's talking about adopting it, but the real proof will be in the pudding. How quickly do we go back into old habits, and how willing are we to employ a highly skilled individual that wants to live in Beaufort West?
Yes.
So I think those will be the interesting challenges that lie ahead, because that's really what we're talking about. And how do we adopt that? So our commitment is to try and make sure that we walk the talk and we don't just talk the talk.
Yeah, I agree with you, because it's easy to talk and the talk. One thing that I have picked up in not necessarily our industry, but people have really become quite comfortable working from home. It is quite nice to not have to put on high heels, especially for us. And people are reluctant to go back into an office space where you have to face the traffic again. So I agree with you. It's going to be very interesting to see what the best approach is going to be and how it's going to work for everyone, because 100% we need each other. We need to see each other, and we need to have a bit of a culture again, because culture within companies
culture is critical, but it goes beyond just culture. There's a lot of, so while there might be efficiency in that people have fewer distractions and lunch breaks or what have you when they're working at home, there is inefficiency that comes about because you don't have the ad hoc casual conversations, because you have to schedule a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting or something. So that cooler talk where often, a lot of business gets done in an informal manner in that way, that's missing. And I think that's 100%. The effect that we feel. Yeah. I think the other thing is about, not just about, not having to put their high heels and makeup on in the mornings. I think it's also the financial implication, which we have to, also be realistic about. People have got used to not spending the petrol money in commuting to work all day, every week. So that is the reality. And so for me, it's actually about creating the incentive for people to want to come back to work.
Okay.
Not necessarily just financial incentive, but around, just it must be somewhere where people are attracted to go. So how many people go and work from a coffee shop because they just want to be in an environment where there are people and there's a bit of a buzz? So how do I create that same environment in the office? It requires us to do something different. So those are the interesting challenges we're going to grapple with.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting going forward. Constantia have recently released their financial results, and it's clear that there's been a significant improvement. So well done on that, Peter, with you and your team. And what are the key highlights of your results, and what do you attribute this turnaround to?
Well, the second part of the question is the easy one. I mean, that's really the hard work of everybody in the organization, the focus that everybody's had in doing the things that they've needed to do in the business. From a highlights perspective, I think for me, the encouraging thing is that, each of our segments across the business and the way we manage the business are all showing underwriting profitability. The challenges we have in some segments is different to others. But at an overall level, our health business, which is the biggest part of our business, we've had shown some really robust earnings over the last couple of years in that business. We've shown good growth. And it is a segment where we are seeing an increase in demand, which is not surprising, given a health crisis. People are more focused around health insurance products. And we have a market-leading position in the health ecosystem, along with our medical malpractice as well. In the other parts of our business, what's really been encouraging for me is our focus on the specialties and the niches. And that has always been the success of Constantia. Yes. And we've had really good growth in the last 2 years in our specialist lines. At the same time, we've had to really shrink the more general business to sort out profitability. So our loss ratios in the sort of general classes have improved from 84% to 51%, which is a remarkable turnaround. Yeah. But that's come at the expense of top line, understandably. But again, it talks to our focus. We don't want to be chasing commoditized business. We're realistic about that. We can't compete in the commoditized space. We want to operate where our intermediaries, and all our business is intermediated, where our intermediaries add value. And that really is where it comes to more complex risk, where it comes to specialist classes of risk as well. And that's a business that's really been growing in our space. And our focus is really there, and how do we support the brokers in the giving of that advice? And how do we respond in terms of, their requirements around product, etc. So that to me has been very encouraging.
I can see growth, and I'm really excited about where Constantia is going. So well done for what you've managed to do. Maybe we can end up sort of with a message from you to firstly your UMA and broker partners, and then to our audience and your audience, the intermediated market.
Yeah, so Rianet, I think throughout my sort of career in the insurance space, it's no secret, I've been a big punter and supporter of the broker and the role that the broker plays in our industry. And that should never be underestimated. I think if you look at recent events, it really highlights the role of the broker and the need for that broker. If you take contingent BI, I mean, everybody talks about contingent BI, like they're the world's expert on it. But, until COVID, no one really outside of our industry knew what contingent BI meant.
Yeah.
Now everybody looks at their policy and goes, have I got the cover or haven't I? And, in that situation, unfortunately, too many people discovered that they didn't have it. Then you had the riots, and again, now Sasria is on everybody's lips. People didn't know who Sasria was. Yeah. And the role that Sasria played. So again, and people look at their policies and go, gosh, have I got that cover? So it really does talk to that role of advice, which has, I think really gone through a period where people have undervalued that advice. And then you have back-to-back crises like we've had in this country. And hopefully that's a wake-up call for people to say, well, maybe getting some advice on this is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And then for us, it's really about how do we continue to support that, and how do we enable that? And particularly that smaller broker. I mean, that's really where our niche is. Is how can we play a bigger role in terms of supporting them? And when I sit down with the brokers, the first thing I will say to them, and my message to them on this interview is, tell me exactly what you're experiencing from us. You don't have to be polite. If I don't know what the problems are in our organization, I don't know what to fix in the business. Yes, I won't have the solution to every problem that you might face, but at least if I know where the issues are, I can address those issues to the best that we can do that. And ultimately, it's about a working partnership. How do we work together? How do we build the trust? How do we build the relationships? It's, our business is a relationship-driven business, from the insured through to the intermediary, through to the insurer, through to the reinsurers. That whole ecosystem is driven by trusting relationships. And how do we ensure that happens? And a lot of it is to do with people, obviously. And how do we give our own people the support to enable them to build that trust with our business partners? That's what gets me up in the morning. That's what drives me, is understanding, what those dynamics are and how we can improve that and make it better.
That's a fantastic
That's my message.
Yeah, it's a fantastic message to end off, and I agree with you. For FAnews also, we also have a lot of heart for especially a smaller broker, because we realize between compliance and all the regulatory changes and making money in the meantime, it's quite a daunting but seriously important and critical task. And it was quite interesting that you mentioned, but it's not only the short-term broker, it's literally every single broker, from life, medical scheme, short-term, every single broker has, we've realized how important their role is over the last 18 months with everything that has happened between COVID, the riots, everything. And it's fantastic to be in an industry where we really know we are making a difference. So thank you for your time. It's great to see the support for the brokers. And I agree with you, communicate. Talk to us, talk to you about what is the problem, so that we can help and try and fix it. So thank you for your time. I am looking forward to chatting with the rest of the Constantia team in the next year or so. So yeah, all the best for next year.